So when you're looking at the monthly cash flow, let me pull it up through here. So you're basically looking at an income statement for the most part. You're looking at income minus expenses. So you get your tenant rental income minus the mortgage payment minus your variable expenses. And then you also have your fixed expenses as well. And then your end result is going to be your cash flow essentially. So it's going to be your A minus B minus C minus D. Pretty straightforward. It's not calculus. It's pretty pretty basic stuff. You just got to know what to look for, pretty much. And then always got to keep in mind, what's your exit strategy, right? So going into something like this, or even with a family home kind of situation, but more so from an investor standpoint, you kind of want to have that exit strategy before you even jump into it. So let's look at the actual numbers to see what that would look like. So for my tenants, in the first unit, I get 2415. The second unit, I get 2515. These are actual numbers. Like, all this is the literal stuff that goes on. So every month, I get 4930 in terms of monthly revenue from them. So the mortgage payment's pretty steep. It's 4345. So that's your PI, TI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and that lovely private mortgage insurance. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then you have your variable expenses. So you have repairs and maintenance I have it at 2.5%. And then vacancies at about 5%. Capital expenditures at about 2.5%. And those percentages are the percent of the actual monthly rent that you're bringing in. And then property management, I have it 0%, because remember, I'm self-managing these properties. And I'm kind of breaking a little bit of a rule here, because what the professional investors will actually say is that even if you don't have a property management firm managing it, you should still account for those costs. However, there's a reason why I don't. And number one is because, like I said, I'm doing it because I want to learn the ropes. But also number two is that income, if I was paying myself essentially to manage the properties, I would have to pay myself that fun little self-employment tax, which is something that kind of defeats the purpose in this whole thing. So yeah, so I'm more than happy to not take payment for it, because it's the fulfillment of doing what I'm doing in the first place. So and then I have my fixed expenses. So with the water is the only thing that's not paid. That's not paid by the tenants essentially. But what I do is I do a water reimbursement of $20 per unit. So the water bill is usually about $90 a month. So minus 40. So that's usually about $50 on my end. Landscaping is on average about $50 a month. I do pest control as well every other month. So that's about $87. And then when you look at your cash flow, A minus B minus C minus D, you get negative $95. So you're probably saying to yourself at this point, wait, now isn't negative cash flow kind of a bad thing? And you'd be right, actually. And ideally, by rule of thumb, according to the experts, you want at least $100 cash flow per door. So in my case, I should actually be cash flowing a minimum $200. So this negative 95 should be plus 200 going into my pocket every month. However, like I said, what also is important is your exit strategy, right? So before even getting into investing in this property, I knew long beforehand that I was going to be a long-term buy and hold investor. So especially, in the seller's market, couldn't be too picky, or I'd probably still be out trying to look for a property at this moment. Now there's many different investment strategies and exit strategies that you can take. In my case, I just knew ahead of time what my exit strategy would be. And essentially in that case, I knew, like I said, I knew what it was going to be over, and as far as being a long-term investor over those years, I knew I was going to basically build up equity over, the next few years, to where I'd be able to do a cash out refinance or do a home equity line of credit, or a HELOC for short. I would remove the private mortgage insurance, the PMI I was telling you guys about, which is actually about $626 a month, pretty much going straight down the toilet, which pretty is it's a hard punch against that 4345 number right there. And then establish a new mortgage amount so that I can then positively cash flow, and then also use the equity that I built up over that time to go ahead and use to finance and purchase another property. So all that planning is going ahead of time, way before you even put in your first offer. So if I can't afford to stomach putting out, $95 out of my regular paycheck every month for my long-term goals, I probably shouldn't be investing in real estate just yet anyway. So essentially this long-term goal and the benefits of, of future and the benefits of the future far exceed this, minor inconvenience of $95 every, this temporary drawback. You just got to weigh those pros and cons. So in this case, I'm willing to do that, for the time being, for the long term. So like I said, it's that delayed gratification, and you just got to take those hits and keep moving forward. So all right, before I move on to the next thing, any questions on any of that?
I do have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Currently right now you have to pay a PMI. The PMI gets erased once you reach 20% of the value of the price, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and you have to have it for a minimum 2 years.
You have to have the property for a minimum of 2 years.
Or they charge, or you don't have to have the property. Well, I guess in that sense you would, because then you would have to have the PMI paid for 2 years. So it's their way of essentially making money off of you. So by giving you the benefit of, so essentially the reason, for the people that don't know, the reason why I have to pay this private mortgage insurance, which is essentially me paying for the privilege of not having to put down either 20% or 25% down payment, because I did lower than 20%. They do what's called charging you this PMI, this private mortgage insurance, because it's like they're essentially taking more risk. So it's an insurance policy for them if I end up defaulting on my loan and they have to foreclose on me. So basically I have to keep paying that. It's going into their pocket every month. It doesn't go into an account. I don't ever see that again. And so once I do hit a 20% equity in the property, I can go back to them and say, hey, I want to refinance. I want to get out of this, private mortgage insurance. They'll see, okay, yeah, you have 21% equity. All right, we're going to remove that. And then it totally gets eliminated. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Got it. So then if PMI is like $600 or so, that would eventually, that would actually like bring you back to a cash flowing property, correct?
Yeah. So I mean, even before you go through the whole refinance process, you would pretty much rerun the numbers, but you would run it as if you were doing the refinance and make sure that it, at that point that it's going to cash flow. Because then you could be in a position where, maybe property taxes have gone up significantly over the past few years, or, maybe things just kept breaking way more often. So you have to, increase your allocation to repairs and maintenance, so your expenses could, in theory, so you have to account for that as well too, because even
Right.
though appreciation is increasing, also expenses and things increase over time, and the cost of goods, so you have to take that into account. So you rerun all these numbers when you refinance, and then basically if it's still negatively cash flowing or the numbers just don't work, you just have to keep working at paying down the mortgage so that you build up that equity until you actually can refinance and start cash flowing positively.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.